Dear friends, good to see you again for our fourth session. Do let us know if you can hear and see me, and this time maybe let us know again from what city you are watching us. So welcome at the fourth session of our online course on entrepreneurship and new venture management. Today, entrepreneurial ecosystems will be discussed, an exciting theme that was also touched upon during our third session and provoked some discussions. We are proud to have a very strong lineup today again, and let me introduce you to them. His Excellency, the Netherlands Ambassador to the Russian Federation, Rob Zwartbol, who joined us in the first session, will comment upon the relationship between the Netherlands and Russia's ecosystems, such as Skolkovo and Innopolis. We have Professor Dr. Erik Stam, who worked at Erasmus University, Rotterdam, Cambridge University, and currently at Utrecht University, and he's a leading scholar in the field of entrepreneurship, and he will start the presentation. It is our great pleasure to have Arkady Dvorkovich with us today, who hardly needs an introduction, but who joins us today as chairman of the Skolkovo Foundation, and he will share with us his comments from his side. And last but not least, we have Vadim Galeev from the Special Economic Zone Innopolis, near Kazan, who will further comment on the options and possibilities his ecosystem offers. You know, we welcome questions as always during the presentations in the chat, and these will be discussed after all presentations have finished. I would like to give the floor to Ambassador Rob Zwartbol. Hello, Rob.
You can see me, you can hear me, Jerke?
Yes, I can see and hear you. I will switch off my sound and video, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and it's a great pleasure to be back. Last week I joined this course as well. Well, I was listening actually to the experts, and I will do the same today. I'm not presumptuous to think that the ambassador will know a lot about entrepreneurship, because otherwise he would have another job. But I'm very happy that we have an outstanding Russian and Dutch lineup at this moment. The Russian leaders, of course, are pivotal in creating innovation and entrepreneurial ecosystems, and they're here. And we as an embassy, we value the cooperation with both Skolkovo and Innopolis. Not only because there are Dutch companies involved in these ecosystems. We have, for instance, the artificial intelligence hub of Philips Medical Systems at Skolkovo. I visited there. But also Porta Vita, for instance, in Innopolis. And both companies, and that's important also for, let's say, hopefully the enlargement of the number, both companies give us a very positive feedback on their residential experience, on the experience they have in the two campuses, if you want to go. Secondly, and that's also important, we regularly visit and take part in events organizing on the campuses of both Skolkovo and Innopolis. These are great places to be. It's not only in a virtual or reality or for companies, but also to be there to join other innovative leaders. And I hope, of course, soon it will be possible again in a physical sense. As you said, the chairman of the Skolkovo Foundation needs no further explanation. I met Arkady Dvorkovich at the Open Innovations Forum last October, and we had a good discussion also there of possibilities of international companies like Dutch companies to participate further in the initiatives they take. Of course, Skolkovo celebrates its 10th anniversary this year. Congratulations. And also hear that you have recently implemented an impressive project on moving Startup Village to the online world. And of course, perhaps you can tell us something about it later this afternoon. Now, I have not been yet at Innopolis myself. I'm planning to do so as soon as possible, but I heard a lot from my colleagues about the successful organization, for instance, of the Dutch-Russian Innovation Working Group that took place in Kazan. And that was several years ago, but also last year there were the world skills. So these are the initiatives that shows that this Innopolis undertaking is big. Now, I'm sure that Erik Stam was there in Innopolis. I was not there, he was there. Erik Stam in Holland is a famous professor on officially strategy, organization and entrepreneurship at Utrecht University. It's not my alma mater, but my son studied there, so it's a very important university. And he's also the dean of the Utrecht University School of Economics. Now, his university, and that's the most important, of course, cooperates with a lot of Russian universities, not only in Moscow, but in Nizhny Novgorod, in Tatarstan, in Tomsk, and like other universities, Dutch universities, we'd like to expand that cooperation, because I think the economic cooperation between Russia and the Netherlands has a lot of has a great future, especially when it comes to innovation and entrepreneurship. So with that, I want to wish you a wonderful course. I think it's the fourth part of the course, and I'm looking forward to listening and looking to the experts. Thank you very much.
Turn on your video and your sound, and then the floor is yours. Erik, if you can turn on your video and your sound, then we're happy to have you with us.
See and hear you?
Yes, I can see and hear you as well. So I will switch my sound and video up, and I will turn on your presentation.
Thank you. Well, first of all, it's an honor and pleasure to be presenting in this lecture series. I think it's a real innovation, and I think this innovation is accelerated by the Corona digital times we live in these days. It is great to serve this Russian-Dutch collaboration on the purpose I think we all care about, namely entrepreneurship. If you talk to entrepreneurs, entrepreneurial leaders, venture capitalists, public policymakers, entrepreneurial ecosystems is the talk of the day. So they all have realized that entrepreneurship is important, but this does not happen in a vacuum. There's a whole ecosystem that nourishes such an entrepreneurial phenomenon. This is not a new realization, even though it has become, let's say, fashionable or more prominent over the last 5 to 10 years. I think we all care about prosperity, and economists not the least. And there have been a lot of studies, books, great minds thinking about this. So going back to the work of Joseph Schumpeter in the previous century, but you can even trace back the role of entrepreneurship and economies to Mesopotamia. But nowadays, entrepreneurship has become much more important than in the past. And if I ask my students, well, what are the entrepreneurs that come to your mind if you think about how the world has changed? They easily come up with names like Sergey Brin and Larry Page, the founders of Google, or the founders of Zalando if you're in Berlin, the founders of Spotify if you're in Stockholm, or if you're in Amsterdam. Well, probably we'll now talk about Booking.com or Adyen, but in the past it used to be TomTom. These are all startups that within a period of 10 years have developed into enormous big firms, changing the world, changing the way we live even. Because can you imagine listening to music without Spotify, or finding your way around in the World Wide Web without Google? And even, I think more so now in times of Corona, having all these online retail platforms is really enhancing life. And in the old days, you would use a map if you were navigating. Nowadays, you use TomTom or other navigation devices. So you need startups, entrepreneurs, and especially startups that move up to become a scale-up to get prosperity. I think the nice thing that you already see in this picture, this is not a one-man or one-woman band. These are often teams. But very often, you also have to realize that this does not occur in every place of the world. So I've been following the population of unicorns. So these are extremely successful scale-ups of the world, which are valued with more than 1 billion euros or dollars. I have to say this is really an extreme version of entrepreneurship, but the firms I just mentioned have been counted as unicorns. Here you see the number of unicorns per 10 million inhabitants, and you can already see that it's a very skewed phenomenon. There are only a few countries, I think this is the map of 2018, in which unicorns occur. So it you really need a particular context for entrepreneurship to flourish. And it's not just the country context. If you would look at it more specifically, so we've done studies in Europe, you can see that this is really a game or very skewed in regions. So it is Stockholm, London, Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris, in which we see these extremely successful firms occurring. So it is not by coincidence that these unicorns are not evenly spread around the world, but they concentrate in a few places, because these places have very specific characteristics or have very high quality environments. That's also the reason why we all talk about Silicon Valley or Silicon somewhere, startup Berlin, Stockholm startup scene, and the startup scene in Amsterdam. So a lot of people also realize that entrepreneurship, startup scale-ups are very much a local phenomenon, and that you also need to organize local factors and actors in order to flourish entrepreneurship, not only to have good ideas, but also to turn these ideas into startups, and not only startups, but also in scale-ups that can change the world and can improve our societies. And nowadays, we talk about ecosystems if we talk about the context of entrepreneurship. We all like ecosystems. They are a nice metaphor because it gives an idea about how a lot of different factors and actors are involved. It's interdependent. It's not easy to steer. You need a lot of people and organizations that collaborate. And it can also collapse if bad things happen. But of course, this is just a metaphor. You would also like to know what is really happening. And this is nice, I would say, a picture of an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So you have a person that comes with an idea that needs to scale up this idea. It needs people, it needs money, it needs entrepreneurial support organizations. And there are all kinds of cycles and people and factors and actors that are needed. Sometimes it's said it takes a village, perhaps a startup village, to raise a kid, but it certainly takes an ecosystem to raise a successful startup and turn it into a scale-up. This is a nice picture, but in itself doesn't say that much. So if there would be one takeaway message from my lecture, it is you need to better understand how an entrepreneurial ecosystem works in order to improve it and in order to navigate through your own ecosystem. Because if you're a startup, there are so many things to care about, to work about, and it's better that you know who is active in the ecosystem, what are the central players, who can tell you where to get money, talent, etc., than to reinvent everything on your own. And that's one lesson for a navigation lesson for entrepreneurs, but also for governments and for entrepreneurial leaders, serial entrepreneurs. They can also improve the ecosystem and can make it better for the next generation. Because also one lesson we learned from entrepreneurial ecosystems is that it is very much a collaboration between public and private parties, and preferably with experienced entrepreneurs in the lead that know how entrepreneurship works, that know the weak links in the ecosystem, and also know other people to team up with and to have collective action to improve the region for the next generation of startups. So I'm a scientist and I would like to improve the world, but if you want to improve the world, you need to also define what you're talking about, because otherwise you can't measure it. And if you can't measure it, it becomes, I would say, pretty hard to improve things. So this is perhaps not the best definition, but we've discussed this with many scholars and also talked to policymakers and entrepreneurs. This is sort of the most abstract definition you can formulate: a set of interdependent actors and factors governed in such a way that they enable productive entrepreneurship within a particular territory. So you can see already some elements of a natural ecosystem. So interdependence, it's not just pushing one button, not just pushing money into it or pushing talent or investing in knowledge or in networks. It's really a whole set of interdependent actors and factors that all need to be in place and need to be properly connected and governed in such a way, so with networks, leadership, to enable productive entrepreneurship. So we're not talking about mafia entrepreneurship here, which is also can be very creative, but about productive entrepreneurship, so that ultimately also leads to prosperity in society. And as I just showed you, entrepreneurship very much depends on the local context, and also the quality of the local context is very different. So you need to look at, well, what is currently present or missing in the local context. It can be a city, a region, sometimes even a country, to get to know how well entrepreneurship is stimulated or perhaps even constrained in a territory. And the good thing is, there has been research on this topic on entrepreneurship and economic development for decades, and we've been able to summarize this in only a few actors and factors. So regions that have a high density of talent, knowledge, financial capital, intermediate services, also to lower the barriers for collaboration and for outsourcing, networks in order to stimulate the flow of knowledge, capital, and other resources. If you have all these factors in place, it is much more likely that entrepreneurship will flourish than if these actors and factors are missing. So it's not impossible, but these factors are known to be nurturing entrepreneurship. And even more fundamentally, which is sometimes unknown by entrepreneurs and policymakers, because it's sort of the lifeblood or the water that entrepreneurs live on, institutions. So having a rule of law, having a culture that appreciates entrepreneurship, especially successful entrepreneurship, that tolerates failure. A physical infrastructure, if there's no digital connections like this or good physical infrastructure, it is also much harder to scale up your business. And of course, effective demand. And well, we've seen the shock of the COVID crisis, how much devastating that can be. But in general, also having a very strong demand, either by consumers, but also very much by businesses in the region, helps you to have launching customers and to start a business much more easy in one region than the other. So if you compress this into one picture, if that is at all possible, otherwise that's also the task of scientists, to make abstractions and not to make movies of the world, but to come to abstractions that give you somewhat more abstract reasoning and measures of how the world works. You can put it into this diagram. Please also try to memorize this. So you have these foundational formal institutions, a culture for entrepreneurship, physical infrastructure demand that needs to be in place for economic interaction to take place at all, I would say, but also for entrepreneurship to occur. And then you have a layer of networks, leadership, finance, talent, knowledge, intermediate services that are all known to be very relevant for entrepreneurship to occur and to flourish. So all these elements need to be in place in order for entrepreneurship to emerge. And that we care about it because that leads to higher levels of prosperity. This is not a blueprint, but this gives you a lens to look at the world, to look at your particular country or region, and to realize or trace or measure or discuss how are we doing? How well is our region doing, and what can we do about this? And you can even make a sort of a quality measure. So here you can see the exercise we did for European regions. Then we had all the elements measured in many different ways. So this is hundreds of thousands of data points to measure the 274 European regions. And here you can see that indeed regions around London, around Paris, Netherlands, Belgium, a large part of the Nordics perform very well. Portugal and the south of Italy, Poland perform very bad. This in itself is an end grade, but doesn't tell you that much about what works and what doesn't work in the region. You really need to look under the hood of the economy, so to say. This is just a speed meter, so to say, and you want to improve the motor of the economy. And improvement is something I think we all care about, not only the public sector, but also the private sector, also universities, entrepreneurial leaders, more publicly spirited entrepreneurs. And to give you an example from the Netherlands, here you have the Dutch provinces. A score of 10 means that you are on the average of the Netherlands. Higher means that you're doing better than the average. Lower means lower than the average, but that in itself doesn't say that much. What you want to know is sort of the DNA of the region. And let me take Utrecht. Utrecht has been seen as one of the most competitive regions of Europe, and also does pretty well in its quality of entrepreneurial ecosystem, but that in itself is not important. This tool allows every region to look for its weakest link, because the weakest link is what holds back entrepreneurship the most. And if we look at Utrecht here, you can see that especially new knowledge and leadership is not that good as you might expect. And these are, let's say, the weakest link. Even a very good region like Utrecht has weak links and has, let's say, worries about things that could be or should be improved. You can also say, well, it is very good in demand and infrastructure. It's one of the most centrally located regions in Europe. It's very prospering. But if you want to improve it, you have to look at the weakest link. So even the best regions have weak links. And we have done this. You can even make it more specific for smaller regions. We've done this in other European regions. This is really a starting point of discussion between actors, stakeholders in the ecosystem to improve the ecosystem. So that is one thing that you can do. I think for entrepreneurs, for entrepreneurial leaders, the entrepreneurial ecosystem framework is also a way to navigate the relevant environment, to navigate the regional economy. It gives you a way to understand who is playing key roles and what kind of function do they fulfill. And you can play around with this. So we've done multiple analysis. You can do LinkedIn analysis. You can do Twitter analysis. You can do surveys asking important people in the region what the network is, important entrepreneurs. Here I show you a Twitter analysis. We used the Twitter accounts of a representative sample of SMEs in the east of the Netherlands. And the size of the dot is how many all the Twitter accounts are being mentioned in their Twitter behavior, and the links are how much they are connected. And this gives you an idea about the daily life world of entrepreneurs in the east of the Netherlands. And you can see what kind of media they use. So YouTube in particular, daily newspapers. You can look with which public actors they interact. You can look at which business associations they interact, which firms are dominant, like for example Dura Vermeer here in the east of the Netherlands. This gives you an idea who is really important in the life of entrepreneurs in this ecosystem. You can also use LinkedIn networks, you can use innovation networks, but this gives you an idea, especially if you're a newcomer, whom should I talk to or where should I profile myself in order to be seen in the region. You can also knock on the door of economic boards or of accelerators, incubators that play an important central role in these kind of incubators. And perhaps Arkady will also talk about that, is the role of Skolkovo. But it's really important as an entrepreneur, especially for a de novo, first-time entrepreneur, to know where you are, where the important players are, and how you can knock on their doors, because especially former entrepreneurs are very willing to act as a mentor, as an investor, and also to broker for you in their networks. And it is really, I would say, stupid as a startup entrepreneur to think that you can do all this yourself. There are so many actors in the region that can help you with that, but you have to, say, navigate through the web of the actors in the region. So, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, everybody talks about it, but that in itself is not useful. Well, we have a shared language is the advantage, but I think we should really use knowledge, data to get to know better our own ecosystem, not just for knowing it in itself, but to improve it with public and private stakeholders, to open it for newcomers, to open a navigation tool to get to know the way around as startups. And also, I think all these feeders of the ecosystem should really be aware of how they can make themselves heard and known for startups in order to have startups accelerate to become scale-ups and to get the best experiments and new value creation in the region, and ultimately to have prosperity. And also, if this is really working to get a virtuous circle to make your region better, with ex-entrepreneurs becoming leaders, venture capitalists, changing the culture. And this is not something that happens overnight, but this is really a game in which public and private parties need to get together, and we can all make the world, but starting with your own region, a better place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Erik. Thank you very much, Erik, for this insightful presentation. We have already questions if you want to share your email. We'll see about that later. I would like to ask Arkady Vladimirovich to turn on his video and his sound to take it further. In the meantime, Erik, you can turn it off for now, and we will ask you later on to join the discussion again. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yes, thank you. After Erik, it's hard to find any new new words to say. We met with Eric a few months ago, and it was very insightful for me. What we have been trying to do in Skolkovo over the last 10 years, we are 10-year-old now, is to basically put what Eric just told us on the ground. We have been trying to put all the elements, all the actors, all the factors that Eric mentioned together on the Skolkovo soil. And Skolkovo soil doesn't mean that it is just 400 hectares in Moscow. It's about Russia as a whole, as we have companies who are working all around Russia. And I would say, while not having unicorns still, we have quite a few success stories that show that we are on the right track. Just to give you a few examples, in the last ranking of the best distant education companies, two Skolkovo residents are among top 5. Those companies are called uchi.ru and Yaklas. Top 5 globally, not just in Russia, meaning that they were really successful, and they were able to explore all the new options available for online education. And of course, they're growing now and growing exponentially. And now it's about scaling up, about building capacity, and going more and more global. Another example is a company called Group IB that deals with cybersecurity and provides services to global companies and global institutions, including, for instance, Interpol. And Russian cybersecurity company providing services to Interpol is, I would say, something special. The most recent example is our small company, Kromis, daughter company of Himrar, a pharma company that just registered a medicine that helps curing COVID-19. Not fully, not 100%, but reduce the time of getting healthy by a few days, which is very, very important. A few things that I think were successful. Well, one thing is what Mr. Ambassador mentioned, a great place to be. That's important. And we found already that those companies who are actually located inside Skolkovo, in our Technopark, for instance, or are working on the premises of our regional operators. We have 13 around Russia, from Vladivostok to St. Petersburg, in many cities already. So those who are sitting together in those technoparks and are getting services from mentors, from acceleration programs, are using co-working spaces, are usually more successful. That's one of the lessons we have learned from our past experience. That's why it should not be just online. Online is important, and the example of Startup Village, where we had a few dozens of thousands of participants recently, it proves that online is important. But offline, the physical presence, daily conversations, daily collaboration on the site are really important for success. And we are happy to have both hundreds of startups. Overall, we have 2,400 now. And big guys like Philips that have been mentioned already, also companies from other countries who are working together and get an important contribution from the whole ecosystem. One of the ways how we did it is digital scouting of startups for big companies, for big corporations, and that worked very well for some of them. We had more than 30 acceleration programs for our startups, and each acceleration program ended with one or two of startups actually bringing their technology into the market and providing services to big companies. So it's not just nice time to spend together. It's a real thing. And we are proud of also of our partners who are working in the region. Sinopolis is one of those, but I already said that we have 13 like that. What was important, and one of the lessons we learned as well is that local context really matters. Russian economy is not like European ones. We have a domination of big, usually state-controlled companies, not only, but many of those are state-controlled, and the demand structure is very specific. So the market depends on just a few players. So startups depend a lot on the decisions of just a few players. And our startups are working mostly in B2B, not B2C. So it's really a big factor. So there are two things that we are trying to do. One is still connecting our startups to those big companies and working with the state in the context of state-initiated programs. Another thing is going global. And Russia is not enough for most of the startups. And in Russia, many of the startups cannot find a sufficient market. So a huge component of our work is bringing our startups to other markets, making connections, networking. Even now, we already had 2 online business missions in China and in Germany, connecting our companies with Chinese and German companies. It was very successful, and we are planning a few more during the next few weeks. Another thing that Eric mentioned was tolerating failures. Yes, it's extremely important. We are still not there. Our culture is still different. We are better than we were 10 years ago, but we are still in a situation when risks of entering this innovation entrepreneurship business is connected with additional risks on top of usual risks, on top of business risks. And our law enforcement agencies are still somewhere in between of tolerating and punishing companies and people. That's very unfortunate, but that's one of the challenges we have been facing. And another one is another lesson is a need to get a constant feedback from the companies. So it's not like creating a framework, putting all the things, all the instruments, all the tools together and just working in the same manner over many years. You need to change those tools, those instruments, those frameworks every time, every year. You need to adjust rules. You need to adjust financial facilities. You need to change people who work with companies. But still, we are proud that many people who are working now in Skolkovo spent all 10 years in Skolkovo. They have huge experience, and they are helping others. They're helping other countries. They're helping other regions. I think one element was not mentioned clear. At least it was not like stressed sufficiently in Eric's presentation. A need of a vibrant science and education community, presence of university or universities in such ecosystems is a must. And our Skoltech University of Science and Technology, is one of the important keys for our success story. It was created in collaboration with MIT, with Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and it's a place where we have more and more fundamental advances in science, and that helps our companies to advance and develop. So I think that's enough for my remarks. I will be ready to answer questions.
for your comments. We have a lot of questions, but before we go to them, I would like to give the floor to representative of Innopolis, Vadim Valerievic. Afterwards, we will ask Arkady Vladimirovich and Erik Stam to come back online, and we will answer your questions. Vadim, if you could turn on your sound and video, then you're welcome to join us. Yes. Hello.
Floor today with you.
Okay,
and,
great.
After Eric's lecture, that was really insightful, and actually it was like kind of lecture for myself because I've learned a lot. I'd like to share my feedback and share the points where I do agree or maybe I disagree a little bit.
Okay, good luck.
First of all, before I start, I'd like to tell our audience what Innopolis is, who we are, and what we do. And we are an ecosystem. And we are a city, a university, and a special economic zone that I'm happy to represent here today. And unlike many other ecosystems that are being created on a sort of foundation, we were an experiment. We are still an experiment that being created in almost an empty field. And it all started with the university. And that's what actually Arkady Vladimirovich was talking about. That's definitely is one of the most important points. And that's where we started from, is education. So the university, Innopolis University, was there even before the Technopark was there, even before the whole city was built. And probably that's one of the reasons why our ecosystem is now shaped as it is. So considering the startup ecosystem and considering what Innopolis is and what Innopolis was for quite some time, we were more a home for corporate R&D centers and for corporate IT development centers. Because Innopolis University was the first Russian private university that was specialized solely on IT, and it's still specialized only on IT. We have this kind of expertise, technological expertise, that we only specialize in IT. Unlike Skolkovo, that specialize in innovations in general, and they do enjoy this broad specialization, and they have all sorts of different startups and all sorts of different innovations from different areas. Our innovations are only in IT, ICT sphere. So the first thing, from the university, we have a steady supply of the talent, and that was the first factor that actually Eric was mentioning in his lecture, in his speech, that the talent and the knowledge, two factors that academically proven that provide benefits for the ecosystem, and we have the university for that. So we, Special Economic Zone, is the next actor in the whole ecosystem, and we provide the legislative, and we also provide the, I'd say, the services and the networks that was also mentioned by Eric in his lecture, these factors to the business. But I'd like to say, honestly, that for startups, maybe our legislation was not that good. And I'd like to say that maybe startups in Innopolis happened despite and in spite of the legislation that we had, and we've changed it a little bit, but that legislation, Special Economic Zone tax regime, it comes with the quite difficult bureaucratic procedure that takes from 2 to 3 months in average to become a resident of Special Economic Zone. And from my perspective, it's not realistic for a startup to wait for 2-3 months for a bureaucratic procedure to happen. And that's why we're really changing the whole set of procedures for startups right now. But there are already some startups in Innopolis that actually occurred here because the university students, they have to work somewhere in Innopolis after they finish the study. And actually, I've seen in the chat that there were some graduates from Innopolis University, so hello. They all know that if you come through the competition, and the competition in Innopolis University is very difficult, it's 40 applicants per one place, then you are able to study, you get a scholarship, but then you have to work somewhere in Innopolis. And there were some smart kids that decided to not to go to work for somebody, but to set up their own companies and create their own startups and work for themselves. And out of these companies, we now have, I think, well, definitely a handful of examples that are recognized on international scene right now. I just would like to mention Innosoft, a company from Innopolis that was not long ago, it was financed. It was a share, some shares of this company were bought by one of the founders of the Uniqlo. They gone through the 500 startups acceleration, and actually very good example of how a small startup from a previously unknown place could actually achieve international recognition. Another startup, for example, Soramitsu Labs, is also a Japanese investor that came to Innopolis, found a good team of people, 60 people now work there, and they now develop a distributed ledger technology system for Central Bank of Cambodia and other financial institutions in different countries in the world. But coming back to what Eric said, I'd like to also stress that even the physical environment sometimes is very important. And Innopolis is a very good example because, you know, unlike other Russian places, we do create here an environment where people would love to live. And we did a research not long ago. We did a research and we understood that maybe we have some difficulties there, but the difficulties arise not from the city and the ecosystem is difficult to navigate, but because it's too easy to navigate. We do believe here in a paradigm that is called city as a service. And this city as a service paradigm actually brought us a lot of people that would enjoy that, but that would actually expect more and more from the city. But we do need more people that are not expecting a first-class premium service, not expected anywhere else in Russia. But we need some people who would love to overcome difficulties, would love challenges, and if you like, would be local Elon Musks or Oleg Tinkovs, as we call them here in Russia. That's Oleg Tinkov is a founder of a Russian Tinkoff Bank, happened to be our resident company as well, their R&D center. And right now, we would like to shift the paradigm. We are creating a whole new set of services because that's probably the only thing that definitely in our control. We are unable, it's out of our mandate to provide investments, but what we could do, we could provide services. So right now, we're trying to create the whole new set of requirements, first of all, what companies could apply, what they could do. And right now, actually, any new company, any startup company could enjoy the simplified taxation regime in Russia here in Innopolis, and instead of 6%, that is a regular rate in Russia in general, companies would pay here 1% only. And we would like to create the whole new set of services for them. So that's something that definitely keep myself busy, and Eric's lecture was definitely a good thing to attend to. So. Thanks so much. I'd be happy to answer the questions. So, yep. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much, Vadim Valerovich. I would like to ask Erik Stam and Arkady Vladimirovich to turn on their video and sound again. And then we can start the discussion. So please, Erik Stam and Arkady Vladimirovich, turn on your sound and your video. Hi, Erik. You can hear us. And Vadim Valerovich, you can stay with us, please. You can hear me, Erik, right?
Yes, see and hear you.
Great. Then I will ask you the first question, while I again ask Arkady Dvarkovich and Vadim Galeev, please come back, turn on your video and your sound. Erik, to start, last Tuesday we had a discussion on entrepreneurial finance. And a lot was said about where, as a startup, you should get your money. And this, it was said that, well, you should first look into your own circle. And ecosystems are not always the best solution, because bluntly said, you have to sell your soul to the devil in order to get finance and support in these ecosystems. What is your opinion on this, and what is the role of these ecosystems according to you? How to help this? Well, make the world a better place, as you said. And then immediately, and next question. Sorry for the long one. I'm sure you will keep up with me. Some of the companies you mentioned, like Spotify, they create prosperity. The question was, except for a degree of democratization in music consumption. Authors and copyright holders are being paid less than ever. And you have many of these startups that turn into big companies, of course, and they are being questioned about their actual value.
Yeah. Well, these are two big questions that I could talk about for 45 minutes. Let me say, first of all, I think the whole idea about an ecosystem is just providing money in itself. And I would emphasize dumb money is not leading anywhere. So the value of an ecosystem is that you would like to have people that provide ideas, money, and also experience. So preferably, you would like to have people in the ecosystem that have been entrepreneurs themselves and channel money towards good ideas. So it's not just providing money, but it's especially the money with experience that makes a difference. And I think the experience is even more important than money. So that would be my first reaction to your first question. The second issue is it's sort of a cat and mouse game. I think without stimulating startups and without turning them into scale-ups, new ideas will not become big. But new ideas becoming big will also lead to drawbacks. And sometimes the vested interests, the incumbents will fight them, I think for bad reasons. Sometimes governments, legislation, civil society will fight them for good reasons. So they will almost never be a completely good thing for society, but without them, we would still be in the Stone Age.
Okay, thank you. Vadim Valerovich, would you like to comment?
Yeah, actually, what I think the need for dump money is, in my opinion, is a bit, well, exaggerated, because what we see here is that sometimes that people do need some smart money instead of dump money. And well, what I think Mr. Dvarkovich would be able to comment here in much more expand, because what they do provide some money, but that's something that we still don't do in our ecosystem. But still, we have some examples of companies that are growing here, and we're not providing money, well, investments in our ecosystems yet. But so maybe Arkady Vladimirovich would expand on that.
Yes, it seems that Arkady Vladimirovich has some trouble getting back on. I'm also trying to help him get back on.
Yes, okay.
Great, thank you. Would you like to care to comment? I don't know if you heard my question.
Yes, I heard everything. I'm just responding to some questions in the chat. There are many.
Yes, thank you for that.
Also important. Well, we do provide funds, and we believe that it is a part of supporting our ecosystem and our startups. There is a problem with state money, with public money, since it's an additional it implies an additional control from the state over how those money are going to be used. And as I explained, there is a problem with the culture of tolerating failures. Sometimes the control agencies do not understand whether money have been used by startups in the right way or not. But we have at least two kinds of programs where we, actually three right now, three kinds of programs where we provide support. First is mini grants, so grants for the initial stage of business, and those are very popular since those grants cover some important expenses for the companies, including rental payments, mentoring services, using labs, marketing services, and many others, IP protection, of course. Also, we provide bigger grants for advanced research, and I would say that pharma companies are using those extensively, and that proved to be very efficient and very important. On the investment side, we have our Skolkovo Ventures facility. It is not big, but it was able to help a few companies, and some of those actually entered the open market already. So we are trying to get smart money into Skolkovo. We are trying to get venture financing. We are trying to get private capital. One of the instruments, the recent one, the third one, was the support of business angels. We agreed with the government that we will compensate up to 50% of business angels' investments into our companies, but not more than the sum of income tax that those business angels paid during the last 3 years. So it is limited to a certain amount, but those are smart money since we share risks with private guys. And already during the first quarter of this year, this facility has been used very actively by private investors, by business angels. So we have a mix of experience, some good experience, but also some pressures from the control agencies about how money are being used.
Okay, thank you very much, Arkady Vladimirovich. A question to both of you, and while I think Vadim Valerovich is connecting back, and Arkady Vladimirovich, you already commented upon it in the chat. So maybe I'll start with asking the question to Erik. Is it really true that entrepreneurship is more relevant than ever before? Because the middle class is under huge pressure worldwide, and specifically now in these pandemic times, COVID-19. Erik, would you care to comment? And afterwards, Arkady Vladimirovich.
Yeah, if you look back at the last century and the centuries before that, we had agricultural economies and managerial economies in which, let's say, routine tasks were dominant. You could learn a craft and could perform this for the rest of your career. You could work in a manufacturing site and continue with this for the rest of your life. Now we live in a knowledge-based economy in which there are many more opportunities, but also in which routine tasks have become digitalized, robotized, and what is left are, let's say, more complex problem-solving and creative tasks. And these problem-solving and creative tasks very much resemble entrepreneurship, because in my opinion, entrepreneurship is about making new combinations to identify and pursue opportunities for new value creation. And now more than ever, knowledge is the raw material for opportunities for prosperity of the future. And the things that can be routinized, that can stay the same, or that will be turned into algorithms, digitalization, robotization, are outside, let's say, the realm. So we need, if we want to change the prosperity of countries in a positive way, people, and especially the new generation, needs to learn how to make combinations of different disciplines, how to combine scientific knowledge with practical knowledge to solve the big societal challenges of today and of the future. And that necessitates an entrepreneurial attitude and skills. If you don't have this, there will not be progress. And this is much more urgent. And also the knowledge as a raw material is much more prominent now than ever before. And that this is not happening everywhere, and that the middle class is suffering, I would say that's even more reason to stimulate entrepreneurship and to lower entry barriers and to enable these new combinations to take place.
Thank you, Erik. Arkady Vladimirovich, would you like to comment?
Well, hard to add anything special on that. I think, well, as I mentioned already, it's really important to have a vibrant ecosystem where you are constantly getting new ideas and new knowledge from different parts of the society, from people, from the universities, and we have our technical university inside, but we are also collaborating with many others, including international universities in many countries, and we are a part of this huge community. I think what is really important is to be flexible, all the time. If you are stuck with one model, it's the end of the story. So you need to be flexible.
Vadim Valerovich, you can hear us?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, I think definitely. Well, hard times are the the times where the entrepreneurs actually thrive, and we can see it from examples. One of the companies here in Innopolis, they have developed a video conferencing system, and they were developing for quite some time. But only in these pandemic times, they were able to grow on a magnitude from their existing number of installations. For example, even here, even in our republic, they had from the governmental side, from the public sector, they are having now more than, well, it's tens of thousands of installations right now they have. And before that, they were just developing a system, a video conferencing system, but there was no need for that yet. But right now, everything has moved into online. Like even our lecture right now is happening online. And maybe if there would be no pandemic, there would be no lectures like that. There would be no need for innovations from entrepreneurs. So definitely hard times are, maybe it's not good for entrepreneurship in general and not good for economic climate, but definitely a kick for some sort of innovations. And innovations happen in hard times. I do believe that.
Okay, thank you very much. Coming back to staying at the topic, of course, of ecosystems, starting again with Erik. In your research, what do you see are the key factors for an ecosystem to become successful? And after maybe Arkady Vladimirovich and Vadim Valerovich can comment on that. And I know it's a very broad question, but you've done a lot of research. But could you elaborate a bit, Erik, please?
Yeah, this is the number one question I always get. What is the most important factor for an entrepreneur ecosystem? And my answer is there is no one most important factor, because that's exactly the nature of an ecosystem. You have to look at how all factors are interdependent. So I think the lesson learned from an entrepreneurial ecosystem approach is that you look at your economy as a system and then look at, in your particular back garden, what are the weakest links that need to be improved in order for the whole system to improve. And for one region that can be talent, for another region that can be leadership, for another region that can be culture. And then very often, if one element is made less weak, then another weak element pops up. So it's a continuous collective learning process that is enabled by the framework. But the framework itself, I would say, is an important heuristic to improve it. But there's not one factor or one button you can push, and then everything will become all right.
Okay, but sorry, Arkady, I will come to you. But as a common demeanor, you've done the research and you showed us the map of Europe, and you showed us which regions are more or less successful. What are the common demeanors then? And is there really a big difference, for example, that in the south of Europe it's more about leadership, and in the north of Europe it's more about, I don't know, technological advancement?
Yeah, well, everything needs to be in place, and then you need to be distinctive. That's the hard lesson. The somewhat easier lesson is that you need to start with the weakest link. I can't make it more simple than that. If you would put a knife on my throat, I would say having a physical without a physical infrastructure and proper functioning institutions, economic life is very hard at all. But that is, we also done research in Africa and in Iraq, and then you know to what degree that makes a difference. And then if you look at Europe, the leading regions very often have also leading universities, because universities are a source of knowledge, are a source of talent. But just having good universities without a entrepreneurial culture, and also with institutions that enable newcomers to enter and labor markets to become flexible, it will also not lead to entrepreneurship. So here you go again. It is a matter of looking at the weakest link in your system, improving them, learning from that, and then improving the next weakest link.
Thank you. Arkady Vladimirovich, would you like to comment? And immediately also a question, what is the weakest link currently that you're trying to improve at Skolkovo?
Well, I fully second what Eric said. It's exactly our vision as well. I would add to this maybe that it's a lot of professional work. Skolkovo Foundation is a few dozens of people, actually a few hundreds of people, people working professionally full-time, many years. And it requires a lot of effort and professional approach to find those weak links and to correct the problems. And as far as Skolkovo is concerned, I mentioned already those things. The market is very specific, and to be successful, there are two options, but I don't think we can choose any one of those. We should explore both. One option is to improve the Russian market. Again, Skolkovo is doing a lot to improve the market for our startups. So we should create basically this market. The second option is to go global and to find success globally. And I think that's a universal factor for the successful ecosystems as well. You have to find a way to be the best globally, not the best in Moscow, not the best in Utrecht, but the best globally. That way you can be really successful. Otherwise, it's not sustainable.
Thank you, Arkady Vladimirovich. Vadim Vilerovich.
Yeah, well, obviously it's hard not to agree with Eric. So yeah, I do agree with Eric as well. But you know, as Michael Porter said more than 50 and I think already 60 years ago, you either have to dominate the market or go into niche. So from one point of view, in Innopolis here, by finding the links that we have to develop and we have to make stronger. First of all, definitely we're going into a niche, into IT, ICT startups and ICT startup ecosystem, IT entrepreneur hub here, creating a hub here in Innopolis. And on the other hand, I do agree with Arkady Vladimirovich when he said that we have to go global. We do compare ourselves with the best examples globally, and obviously we need to create our services according to the best examples globally, not according to the local market needs, because it's 2020 and everyone can go global. And you know what, in IT market, it's even worse, because every developer, every programmer, well, JavaScript programmer, C++ programmer, he is a C++ programmer everywhere. And they all know English, so they are global already. And they have very transferable skill. And for them, it's very easy to go abroad. And we know that 65% of Russian developers are considering moving abroad. So it's even harder for us. From one point, in our ecosystem, we have to build the links that are just generally creating comfort for them. And on the other hand, we need to create an ecosystem and environment that would where we will foster challenges here for startups.
May I just add a couple of words about who we compete with in IT? I think those are interesting things, both Innopolis and Skolkovo more generally. And it was partially on the map that Eric showed. So one of the examples is Estonia, very successful one with very good IT guys, and many people use this jurisdiction to at least to be successful in Europe and with European Union countries. The second one that was quite active recently, and many people go there, is Minsk, Belarus, with their high technology park. They specialize on IT only. They apply British law in Minsk, only in this enclave, only in this island of IT companies. And they have a few hundred of people, very professional, very good in some of the IT niches. Also, Serbia was a good one to go global. So if Russian brand is not good enough for some of the countries, you can go to Serbia, where you have more or less the same culture, but it's in the center of Europe. So interesting examples that people use now.
Great, thank you very much.
Absolutely, I can add here.
Yes, please.
Oh yeah, because also I think definitely Minsk is on the radar right now. What they're doing is something absolutely terrific with creating their environment there. At least in terms of legal jurisdiction, it's probably one of the best in the world right now. But also, I think we can add Astana and watch closely for what Astana is doing. Maybe not only in IT, but in general in fintech startup scene. Astana may grow big because they also imply British law there and very good taxation system. Yeah, I entirely agree with Arkady Vladimirovich here. That's definitely interesting examples. And Estonia also a very interesting example.
Thank you very much. There was a question actually to Erik Stam before, if any of his research that he had shown, has it also been done in Russia? And since I did not see the map, I guess the answer is no. I don't know, Erik, have you done any research about ecosystems in Russia?
Well, then you should knock on the door of my colleague Hein Rolsema, which I think some of you might know better. So he's involved practically in, let's say, the local experience and comparing those ecosystems. I've not been involved in entrepreneurial ecosystem research in Russia myself. I've been involved in the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor quite intensely, and they have quite a good overview of the state of the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Russia at large. And we're currently expanding with a regional ecosystem monitor together with the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. So it would be nice if we could have some city regions like Moscow, Minsk, and other, perhaps also Tomsk and other places as a comparison, because I think it's important to have a proper benchmark. So the picture I've showed you about the Netherlands, well, the Netherlands is a rather homogeneous country, but if you want to improve the Moscow ecosystem, I think it's better to have relevant peers in order to improve yourself and not to improve you with the average Russian region, so to say.
Yeah. We have a message in the chat that Higher School of Economics did the research. I think Professor Goldberg did that, so maybe we can look into that.
Yes. Yep. And again, we will also set up a community for those people who are joining our course, and maybe we can also involve them in these questions. For now, actually, the last discussion that took place between Arkady Vladimirovich and Vadim Valerovich about IT, the ICT sector, technology, it's a nice bridge to our next lecture next Tuesday, again at 4 o'clock Russian time. It's a technological entrepreneurship. And we will have Ksenia Padoynitsina. She's teaching at the Technical University of Eindhoven in data science and entrepreneurship. And we'll have Alexei Nikolaev from the Russian Venture Capital with us next Tuesday. For now, I would like to thank all those who joined us today, all the attendees, but of course, first and foremost, our speakers, Erik Stam, thank you very much. Arkady Tvarkovich, thank you very much also for your time. And Vadim Galeev from Innopolis, thank you very much. The lecture has been recorded. All the attendees, you will receive the links and the invitations to the next lectures. We have been really happy to see again a couple of hundred people joining us. I see our ambassador says thank you very much also to all the speakers. Wishing you all a very nice day. Stay healthy, stay safe. Looking forward to seeing you on our next lectures. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Vadim. Dank Erik. Bye-bye.